nobody!
Kevin? You saved my life?
Sure. Why do you think I wasted all my time helping all these other losers? I just wanted the pleasure of waxing you myself.
I told you he'd be back. It's that time of the week again, folks, where I take a dive back into the wonderful, wacky world of Ben 10, and as I'm headed to Star Wars Celebration this weekend, I'm going to keep this short and sweet as I've got a lot of shit to prepare for. This week's installment follows a Battle Nexus Mortal Kombat gladiatorial situation that does exactly what it says on the tin. It allows Ben and the returning Kevin 11 to battle things out in a 3 stages of hell match throughout this episode, with the writers cleverly seeding the final encounter and in the inevitable solution to our mutated friend, and positioning the lineup for the season's conclusion with some handy insights to our lead protagonist. We begin with Kevin and Ben duking it out in a turbine field when they're suddenly abducted and forced to compete against BattleBots in front of a random assortment of aliens acting as an audience.
Good times!
Ben and Kevin manage to resolve their respective dilemmas and quickly go to move on each other, but are quickly tagged and placed in a detention area for food when they're introduced to the other inmates and their pseudo-leader, Technorg.
That's a fake laugh.
It's real!
After Kevin incites another brawl, they are escorted out and introduced to the owner of this contest of champions, Slick's Vigma.
Who?
A droid that makes a living off enslaving various competitors from across the universe to fight in an intergalactic tournament. It's here where Slicks decides that life isn't difficult enough for Ben and Kevin and shackles them together for their next fight, which is up against Technorg.
Why are you the way that you are?
Kevin attempts to brute force his way through this, while Ben has to resort to his smarts, having timed out from Forearms who aided him during the food court battle. Ben manages to get through to Kevin, realising that in his condition, Kevin possesses the ability to combine certain abilities that Ben could not, and they successfully team it against Technorg, only for Kevin's inner demons to rear their ugly heads again and want to take it a step further. Ben goes to stop him and Kevin's attention refocuses until they're pulled out of the fight by Slicks, who's impressed by what he saw. Sometime later in the mess hall, Technorg approaches Ben, offering his gratitude and servitude as a means to honour Ben's actions in the arena, sparing his life. Ben says that the way he can repay them is by helping them escape. Technorg agrees and they formulate a plan to escape and create a riot which allows Ben as Grey Matter and Kevin to reach Slicks. After some hair-raising moments with Technorg, we round out with Ben become an upgrade to manipulate Vigma and allow all the slaves to escape from the ship, with Ben believing that he got everyone out until he realises that Kevin is still there.
Why won't you die?
Kevin attacks him, explaining the grudge he holds against him for his current situation and is a necessary debt that needs to be paid. It's here where after multiple failed attempts to stop Kevin throughout this as the aliens that Kevin has become, Ben digs into the arsenal and introduces him to Cannonball.
Surprise, motherfucker!
Ben makes short work of him, but with the help of Technorg manages to get off the ship as Kevin jettisons out into space and reunites with Gwen and Max on Earth. Now, as we see with some of these episodes, you find that the stars align and we get some legitimately creative installments that allow for characters to flex and have fun, just like last week's episode for example. The difference with this one though is the fact that it's canon and just seems to happen but subtly shifts our perspectives about Ben. This was an enjoyable watch and truly cements Kevin as being one of the best antagonists for our young prodigy, and I love how we get the setup for Cannonbolt's reveal in the final moments as the only alien that Ben could dial in that had a one-up on Kevin, and what it teaches us about Ben's abilities. We only had Kevin 2 weeks ago in regard to these reviews, and that encounter was pretty interesting despite my reservations on the way that the story was handled and how it played out against what I would have preferred to see. But to witness him in action again, with an entirely new skill base, was the most enticing factor to this little escapade and what it forces Ben to do. Now, admittedly, a lot of what Kevin learnt before this was likely through reckless actions attempting to test his limitations, but once Ben got involved and taught him how to start combining the abilities, it evolved his threat level. Ben essentially strengthened his archenemy to almost an unbeatable level for any one of his aliens to overcome alone, which retroactively sets up what we'll see Ben have to do in the Season 2 finale and how he handles that situation. So, to then pull Cannonbolt out of the woodworks was the only viable option to escape Kevin's clutches, as Ben acquired this form after their first meeting and will go on to gain another form before their last. This entire episode shows Ben coming up short against Kevin due to the combined nature of him now, and even as Forearms he struggled. The difference on the Golden Gate Bridge 2 weeks ago was that Kevin had just acquired all these abilities and hadn't had 2 seconds to put himself together and figure out how to use them. So Ben knew what to duck and dodge past, only the falter when Kevin matched Forearms' brute strength in that instance, and he did still need Lieutenant Steele's support before meeting a potential demise. In essence, Kevin has become Ben's greatest foe currently through his own actions, and it makes you realise that Ben didn't truly combat Vilgax in Season 1 either, he just danced around him, by simply using parlour tricks to subdue him, and only Max was powerful enough to overcome him briefly due to their history and the understanding of his limitations. What I'm getting at here is that Ben still has a lot to learn, and this episode exemplifies his greatest quality, his street smarts. When you assess all the previous fights throughout the show against the Circus Freaks, Zombozo, Clancy, the Megawatts, Hex, and Dr. Animal to name a few, he did force his way through a few of them, but it all came down to having to outsmart his opponents, and with Max and Gwen's help. Whereas with Kevin and Vilgax, they are proven to be far more intelligent and personal foes for our group who can outwit Ben, so it took surprise factors to overwhelm them both like Cannonball and Max respectively. Now that Ben has played that card against Kevin, he can start to prepare for it in the future and mull this fight over in his head and consider how to stop him again. And Vilgax is a galactic conqueror, so he will be a natural counterweight against anything that Ben can throw at him, which sets up Ben's understanding of how to support his future self against Vilgax then. Ben has never been powerful with the watch alone, it's always come down to what he's chosen to do with it in that moment that makes him strong. But through what we've seen him do up against both Vilgax and Kevin, we now understand his limitations, but through that his strengths. When you remove Max and Gwen from the fray, he is more than capable of figuring a way out, and it worked to overcome Vigma, who was an interesting villain, but was essentially rendered pointless by the end, and was just a foil for getting Kevin off-world by bringing this contest of champions to Earth. A concept I would have loved to collect a larger understanding of, namely why Slicks was doing this. He says it's for the entertainment of the universe, but surprisingly we see him return again in Ben 10 Omniverse doing the same damn thing, with the same reasoning, so is it that simple, or is there a higher power to this? Either way, to enslave a large assortment of aliens and people is a bit of a fucked way to go about doing things, but it does make for an interesting story. One last worthy mention is the Omnitrix itself. As it turns out, for those of you unaware, the watch will protect the wearer, which at this point would confirm it carries a degree of sentience, and is aware of what Ben tries to do with it. Where in situations that Ben has wanted a particular alien, it's given him another that actually helped him resolve the matter in a more effective way. This is a factor that is confirmed to us much later in the series, but it's awesome to get this confirmation here in such a subtle way, when you realise that Ben had just timed out his upgrade, but not 2 minutes later, he goes Cannonball where the watch likely knew this was his best option. Though it does draw up the question of how does the watch timing work? Is there a way to quantify it? Who knows? That's been one of the biggest and widely debated aspects to the show for the longest of times, and it's something I'd love a little more confirmation over as to how it works, but only time will tell. This was, as I mentioned, a highly entertaining episode, and as it turns out, a rather insightful one as to the hierarchy of this series right now, and brilliantly sets up future events with context that you normally wouldn't consider until you've reached that point in the show, as I didn't until recently rewatching it. The stars truly fell into place with this, and it is, in my opinion, one of the strongest of Season 2, which, looking back at what we've received in just these first 5 episodes, is significantly stronger than what we had in Season 1. And there's still more to come, and 2 of the strongest inclusions of the entire franchise are still on the way. That's going to do it from me for this week though, everyone. Thank you for stopping by. As usual, I'd love to ask that you subscribe and leave a like, as I'll be continuing my way through this series on a weekly coverage. And until next time everyone, take care, and I'll catch you later.